Next level warfare. This is the C-5 Galaxy, sitting on the tarmac to load two M1 Abrams, a test of physics and patience. For 50 years this airplane has been eating tanks, and today it proves why nothing else replaces it. The Galaxy's nose is more than a door. The entire front section pivots up on hinges the size of trash cans. The opening is 19 feet wide and 13 foot tall, big enough to swallow a city bus without scraping paint. The nose section can weigh as much as a loaded 18-wheeler, held up by hydraulics that operate at pressures used to cut steel. It can carry Minuteman missiles, Apache helicopters, anything the U.S. military owns that will fit. But a massive mouth means nothing if you can't swallow. The cargo floor sits about 10 feet off the ground, creating a ramp angle that can make a tank slide backward. Steel treads on aluminum are about as grippy as ice skates on marble. Too much throttle and 70 tons lurch forward, too little and it slides back into whatever's behind it. To solve that, the Galaxy does something most planes cannot, it kneels. Using the landing gear hydraulics, the main gear compresses while the nose gear retracts deeper. The aircraft bows forward like it's greeting royalty. Kneeling drops the cargo floor from roughly 10 feet to about 3 feet, truck bed height, and flattens the ramp. That difference is the border between scraping undercarriages and rolling straight into the bay. Inside the cargo bay is 121 feet of uninterrupted floor. The Wright brothers' first flight was 13 foot shorter than this hole. The floor is lined with rails every 20 in, a pallet system dating to Vietnam, and 8,336 tie-down rings, each strong enough to hold a small yacht. Those anchors matter because of how this plane is loaded. Vehicles can roll in the back and out the front without backing up. In Vietnam tanks drove straight through into combat while engines were still running. Today it's about speed and efficiency, but the capability remains. Loading isn't casual. Balance is everything. A Loadmaster's tablet runs software to calculate center of gravity, the same problem the Wrights stared at, scaled up to 720,000 pounds. 2 feet too far forward and the nose won't lift on takeoff. 2 feet too far back and the pilot loses control. As each Abrams climbs the ramp, 6 airmen swarm it with chains rated for 25,000 pounds. They use roughly 40 chains per tank because turbulence can multiply forces into lethal loads. When the second tank loads the floor bends, 6 inches of designed flex. Those ribs along the walls aren't decoration, they transfer 280,000 pounds to the wings, spreading the load. With both tanks chained, the nose closes and the real job begins 3 stories up, making 720,000 pounds fly. Climbing to the cockpit is like climbing an office building that moves. The cockpit sits high so the pivoting nose clears the cargo below, otherwise the pilots would dangle upside down. Through 23 wraparound windows you finally see why they call it a Galaxy. It's massive. The flight deck looks like a NASA control room. Modern airliners went digital, the Galaxy kept analog backups because computers can glitch at the worst times. There are 3 crew positions, pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer, because there are too many systems for 2 people. The flight engineer sits behind a wall of switches and breakers that looks like a 1970s stereo shop exploded. The pilot's yoke looks tiny, but it commands hydraulics that move control surfaces larger than most apartments. The rudder alone is 1,200 square feet, each elevator rivals a Cessna wing. Taxiing requires thinking ahead, the main wheels are 110 foot behind the nose wheel. Imagine driving with your back wheels in your driveway and the front wheels across the street. Today they need 8,400 feet of runway to get airborne, 1.6 miles of concrete. Speeds are precise, at 120 knots you're committed, at 140 knots the pilot pulls, at 155 knots you're finally flying. Throttles forward and 172,000 pounds of thrust fight 720,000 pounds of mass. Each engine drinks roughly 400 gallons per minute, filling a car's tank every 2 seconds in engine terms. Acceleration pushes everyone back as the Galaxy reluctantly agrees to move. At rotation the nose rises to about 13 degrees, while the tail drags until lift builds. For 4 endless seconds you pivot on wheels 110 foot behind you, waiting for physics to decide. Then the wings generate roughly 750,000 pounds of lift and gravity loses the argument. The landing gear takes 90 seconds to retract, 28 wheels folding into 5 bays, and when the doors close the Galaxy morphs from ugly duckling into graceful, if enormous, swan. It drinks roughly 50,000 pounds of fuel per hour and hauls America's heaviest weapons. Climb is slow at max weight, roughly 500 feet per minute, a Cessna climbs faster. But as fuel burns, performance improves. Cruise sits near 41,000 feet where thin air makes fuel economy merely bad instead of terrible. There's a crew rest area behind the cockpit with seats and bunks. On an 11-hour Atlantic hop cruise rotate while George, pilot slang for autopilot, steers. The wings were 4 General Electric DF-39 engines that have been around since the Beatles. Each makes about 43,000 pounds of thrust. Together they produce more sea-level push than the Space Shuttle's main engines. They were the first high-bypass turbofans on a military plane. Most air goes around the engine instead of through it. The hot core makes 15% of thrust, the big fan makes 85%. That's why the C-5 can go 5,000 miles without refueling even when it weighs more than a small building. Fuel is massive, 51,750 gallons in 12 tanks. As fuel burns the balance shifts roughly 2 in per hour. The flight engineer becomes a fuel juggler, moving thousands of gallons between tanks with 11 transfer pumps to keep the center of gravity safe. Get it wrong and the plane becomes nose heavy or tail heavy, neither is fun at 40,000 feet. For true long-range missions the Galaxy refuels midair from a KC-135 boom. Fuel flows at about 6,000 pounds per minute. One refuel can deliver 200,000 pounds of fuel, essentially doubling the plane's weight while flying at 400 miles per hour. Keeping tanks full is one thing, controlling the machine is another. Hydraulics move everything at pressures that would cut steel. Titanium lines snake through the airframe because steel tubes would shear under their own weight during hard turns. There are hundreds of feet of titanium tubing and 4 separate hydraulic systems for redundancy. Lose 1, no problem. Lose 2, still fly. Lose 3, you can still land, though the crew will be thankful for clean underwear. After 11 hours crossing the Atlantic the Galaxy begins descent toward Poland from 41,000 feet. They've burned roughly 550,000 pounds of fuel. That 90-ton weight loss completely changes handling. Landing weight stays near 540,000 pounds, heavier than a full 747, but the Galaxy feels almost sprightly. Approach begins 150 miles out on a 5-degree glide slope instead of the normal 3 because this mass needs aggressive deceleration. At 10 miles the landing gear begins to deploy, 28 wheels and 5 assemblies fighting 250-knot airflow. Gear doors rip open like a barn roof being torn off and drag drop speed by 20 knots, a built-in parachute. The pilot lands something they can't see, the main gear is 110 foot behind the cockpit. Crossing the threshold at roughly 50 feet, the pilot pulls power and raises the nose. The main wheels kiss concrete carrying 540,000 pounds. The nose stays up a while, the pilot actually flies it down instead of letting it drop, like a reverse wheelie. When all wheels touch, organized chaos erupts. 8 spoiler panels pop up like giant hands, destroying about 40% of wing lift instantly. Then the Galaxy's signature stopping technique, cascade thrust reversers. Dozens of curved vanes swing into the bypass airstream, redirecting it forward through gill-like openings. It's like turning a boat motor around and gunning it in reverse. Reversers provide roughly 35% of engine thrust forward, about 60,000 pounds of braking force. Loose debris gets blown forward past the cockpit windows, the whole aircraft shudders as engines fight their own thrust. The carbon brake discs absorb approximately 160 million foot-pounds of energy. Temperatures reach about 2,000 degrees, hot enough to melt aluminum. Cooling fans run for 45 minutes after landing, sounding like giant hair dryers. The Galaxy typically needs 6,000 feet to stop, 8,000 is preferred for comfort. Once parked, the process reverses. Nose up, plane kneels, tanks roll off into Poland roughly 14 hours after leaving the States. Yet the C-5 doesn't need perfect runways. Give it 5,000 feet of reasonably flat dirt and it's happy, highways, desert strips, Arctic ice, wherever it's needed. 3 companies tried to replace the Galaxy and failed. That's why the Air Force is spending about $10 billion to keep them flying until 2040, new engines, digital cockpits, strengthened wings. They're rebuilding aircraft older than most of their pilots because nothing else can do what the Galaxy does. When you see that massive nose tilted skyward at an air base, you're not looking at an airplane. You're looking at a world where distance defines possibility. The C-5 Galaxy makes everywhere feel next door. Next level warfare. Bye for now.